the mob mentality reminds me of basically Aristotle and his design. He was so brilliant, his design for governments. So he had three basic designs. It turned out to be there's the good and the bad. So he would argue that the best form of government would be the benevolent dictator, because things would get done. You don't have delays. It's all for the benefit of the good of the people.
Dictator king.
But when that person turns out to be a tyrant, it can be really, really bad. So that's the worst form of government.
Yeah.
So you got the best and the worst.
Yeah.
The next level would be the group. So the group that gets together and formulates and designs a government that's for the best for the people would be great.
Yeah.
Until that group decides for their own personal interests and become an oligarchy.
Yes.
That would be the second worst form of
Yes.
government. Then the third section would be the democracy, the worst form of government, because it's slow, it's cumbersome. You got to get the votes, and you got to get people. You got to have educated people that understand stuff and work together. That's the worst form of government. Except it's the best because it's the collective mind.
Yeah.
So it's ground up, not top down. It's bottom up, not top down. But the bottom has to be educated.
Yes.
They have to know the truth about who they are.
Yeah.
You can't be subjected to this ideological stuff which Plato wrote about. So Plato, I talk about Plato in the government. So his thought was, okay, you got two people. You got a big guy with a little coat, and you got a little guy with a big coat.
Yeah.
So the government should come back. He didn't say government.
Yeah.
Society should come back and switch it for him, take care of him. That's the beginning of Marxism. Hello, you're not evaluating and including in your formula human nature. The democratic process is the best because it's bottom up and you get the collective mind. The collective mind is always better than the individual mind.
Yeah.
But it's slow. It takes time, but you got to have education. That's the key. And he was big on the middle class. The middle class has to have the education.
Yeah.
That's where the creativities come from. That's where the multitudes would be working and the jobs and all that other stuff. But for King George III being a tyrant, we would have never had a revolution.
Amazing.
There would have never been birthed a constitution, the most incredible contract between a people and its government ever in the history of mankind, ever. Boom. I say July 3rd should be King George III Day. We give gratitude to you, King George.
That's right.
That sounds a little crazy.
No, but I get it.
But I'm grateful for King George. Now, I didn't live at the time.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't real comfortable when people are, your neighbor is for the crown and you're for the revolution. It probably was
not a good idea.
Right? Without him, there would never have been a birth of the most incredible document ever. Yet they needed more work. So let's talk a little bit about that, the spectacular history.
Yeah.
So you have George Washington acting like Cincinnaticus. He walked away several times from being
Didn't want power.
a dictator.
Didn't want power.
They came to him and said, you be dictator for a couple of weeks, and he solved the problem, and he walked away and went back to his farm.
Beautiful.
Hello? Spectacular.
Spectacular.
Washington emulated him.
Wow.
And that gave the opening for the Continental Congress to get together and do all their fighting and all their stuff and birth the Constitution with the Bill of Rights, which is it was miraculous it ever happened. But it needed further work. Washington steps down. Adams, I think, was his vice president. He became president. He won. And then Jefferson was his vice president. And so Adams and Jefferson had a battle royale for the re-election. Adams loses. So Adams goes, well, I'm gonna flood the federal bench with all my Federalist judges. So he sends out all these orders, before he resigns, getting all these guys to be Federalist judges. Jefferson takes office and says, we're not having this. He cancels it. So a guy named Marbury got one of the invitations. And he says, I'm not taking this. I'm not taking this sitting down. I'm going to sue. So he sues Madison, who was Secretary of State or whatever it was. And he says, well, I want my appointment. And he files a writ of mandamus to the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court doesn't take writs of mandamus. They take writs of certiorari. That's it. That's the only way you're going to get there. And they decide what they want to take and what they don't want to take.
Yes.
It's up to them, okay? Jefferson was not a fan of the Supreme Court. He thought the Supreme Court should be once a year and discuss contracts, right? So this case, John Marshall, one of the heroes of the Constitution, he should be celebrated magnificently. He says, "Okay, I know these guys. I think we're going to take this little writ and we're going to rule on it." So he knew Jefferson, he knew Adams, he was in the Revolution, he knew all these guys. And basically what he says, "You guys are acting like little tyrants that we broke away from. You, Adams, trying to stack the court, we're not going to have any of that." He kicked that out. You, Jefferson, you're basing this on an illegal act by the Congress. We're kicking this out. And by the way, the sole determiner of the constitutionality of your conduct as executive branch, as a legislative branch, is the judicial branch. We decide of constitutionality of your conduct. Boom, done. You're both screwed, and that's the rule. That is the final keystone that set into place the arch of the equal balance in our government. Wow. That's why we call that the final keystone. It brought the balance. Now we can destroy the balance. You can be mob rule. Yeah. That's one of the dangers is this mob mentality. Yeah. The improper or corrupted thought process that comes out that says, "Oh my God, this is awful, this is terrible." Everybody reacts to it. Yeah. That's really bad. Yeah. It's really bad. You could end up in a nuclear war with an improper assumption. Yeah. That's not good.
You want the guy that doesn't want the power, but wants to kind of do the work because he cares broadly about outcome of community, of society, not how do I get more power, how do I get more riches, how do I get more control.
Right. Has this insidious concept infiltrated our system such that the groups and the leaders want to seek this more than justice or truth?
For publicly traded companies, they're reporting every quarter, right? So that's 4 times a year that they have to report. Elon Musk wanted to take Tesla private at one point. He felt like as long as it's a publicly traded company, he's compelled to make decisions that are not necessarily best for the company, but he's got a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders to report earnings in a certain manner, and it's going to be compared to the quarter before and the year before that quarter. And we have a very myopic view because we're forced into a myopic view of quarterly numbers.
You have to remind yourself that this is just an agreement. It's not who I am. And and when you do that, you begin to awaken. The blinders are taken off, and you can then see a better solution. You can see how thinking differently would benefit the company and the society at the same time. But when you're locked into this is all we're going to do. Our purpose is to collect and preserve paper slips and metal discs. You got a problem.
Just Elon Musk saying, "I'm thinking about taking this company private." It's not about your politics. It's not about any of that stuff. It's just simply what motivates an individual to act. And if the motivation to act is pure, I think we celebrate, irrespective of where you stand on the aisle. This identity politics that we talked about earlier, that invades the mind and hearts of people and says, "No, I'm not allowed to like that guy. I'm not allowed to."
Let's talk about that. A tree grows from the roots up. It doesn't grow from the top down. There is a philosophy called pragmatism. And the pragmatist says the end justifies the means. So if we want to get to this end, then the means, whatever means it gets, we get there. And the 20th century was scourged with that philosophy. The ancients had that philosophy, but they also, in the equation, they had morality and virtue. So if it was morally and virtuous, then it's okay to do it. Okay? In the 20th century, they removed those two elements. And so there was no morality or virtue. So you could start a society, let's say a national socialistic government that owned the power of commerce and decided, well, these certain people, they're no good, they're bad, we'll get rid of them. Okay, well, then that's the end justifies the mean. You've defined that certain class of person as unacceptable, a scourge on your particular society, so you get rid of them. Well, how often did that happen? How many people did Mao kill? How many people did Stalin kill? How many people did Hitler and their groups kill?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the scourge of the 20th century. Well, guess what, Alan? It's evolved to the 21st century.
Yes.
So if it's false and if it's manipulative and it's designed to control people by emotion, it's corrupted. So pull back the curtain, Toto. Pull back that curtain and expose it.
Yeah.
And then it has no power over you.
Yes.
You don't have to fight it.
Yes.
You don't have to kill anybody. You don't have to have a revolution. Just become aware.
Yeah.
Compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
Compassion comes from awareness, and understanding comes from education. You understand what it is, then you have compassion for it. You understand that they have a corrupted thought, an ill thought, an improper thought. That's all. And when you pull back that curtain and expose the understanding of that, we're all the same.
Yeah.
And so that equals compassion. We're all in the same boat. And guess what understanding and compassion is? Forgiveness. That's what it truly is. Forgiveness is not, oh, you punched me in the nose, never do it again, right? Oh, you don't. That's not forgiveness. That's making it real. Understanding, you get to understand that it's a shadow people. They're not who they are. And then you have compassion for them.
Wow.
That's what needs to be set out into the mob mentality.